Thank you very much, colleagues, for joining. And of course, more colleagues are also joining now, but a very warm welcome. And it is really a pleasure to welcome you all to this session, um, focusing on AI, and which is, of course, part of the gLocal Evaluation Week. My name is Jane, and I'm the Regional Evaluation Advisor for East Asia and Pacific for UNICEF, and I'm based in Bangkok, and I'll be moderating this session. And for this year, and for this particular gLocal Evaluation Week, I think it's really been great to just see that the conversation is centered on a particularly important and timely theme: the role of AI in transforming evidence related to evaluations, from how we collect the data, how we generate insights, and ultimately how we also support better decisions. I am sure, like many of us, we are experiencing this in our work, where evaluations are operating in an increasingly complex environment. And many of our organizations are asking us to generate faster and more real evidence, capture richer and more inclusive perspectives, and also support adaptive programming in dynamic and often fragile contexts. And we know very well that despite all this, traditional approaches, whether purely quantitative surveys or qualitative methods, are often struggling to keep pace with these demands. And for us, we see this is where AI-enabled approaches comes in. Yeah, because it is offering us more new possibilities. And we are going to explore all this today, how AI can help us to bridge the gap between the scale and depth, enable continuous listening and rapid synthesis of data sets, and also strengthen our ability to capture a wide range of perspectives, including those too often left behind. And for us at UNICEF, this conversation is particularly critical. Our mandate requires that we not only generate evidence, but that we do so in ways that prioritize equity, helping us better understand and respond to the needs of the most disadvantaged and marginalized children. So for us, this session today brings all these issues into practice. And we are going to hear 3 concrete examples of how AI is already being tested and applied in UNICEF evaluation work, from AI-assisted conversational surveys to social listening and real-time insight generation to tools that support equity-focused analysis of evaluation evidence. And for us, this is just not about the tools. It is about what these innovations mean for how we design evaluations, how we engage with communities, and also how we ensure evidence leads into action. So so this afternoon, I'm really pleased and also honored to present my colleagues who are our presenters for today's session. For the first tool, which is the AI-powered survey, this will be presented by Ali Safanejad and Daniel Alonso. Ali is our multi-country evaluation specialist based in Bangkok. He developed this tool to address a key methodological gap in evaluations. In his evaluation work, he realized that there were some gaps that he thought an AI tool were going to help bridge. So, and this is really the bridging the richness of qualitative insights with the speed, scale, and consistency of automated surveys. He has piloted this tool that is going to present today, tested it, and continues to enhance the tool in his evaluation work. In his presentation, he will demonstrate how the tool is helping overcome bias, integration challenges, and operational constraints to generate deeper and more reliable evidence for decision making. Daniel is our multi-country evaluation specialist based in South Asia, and he has taken this tool. He has tested it in a real-world evaluation in Maldives, and today he's going to give us some perspectives of how this tool worked in this real-world evaluation, and then he's provided some useful feedback to enable the enhancement of this tool. Welcome, Daniel and Ali. And then for the second tool, the AI for social listening, This will be presented by our colleague Juan Pablo Yepes, who is a social and behavior change expert with UNICEF Program Group based in Valencia, where he leads the digital community engagement portfolio. He has been instrumental in enhancing the capability of the I Hear You social listening tool, which was initially developed by colleagues in South Asia and is now leading its global scale-up. Through his work and along with other initiatives, Juan is advancing the use of digital tools and strategies to strengthen social and behavior change outcomes. And this particular tool itself responds to a key gap in traditional approaches, which is limited real-time insights in community perspectives and the challenges of analyzing large volumes of feedback, often making SBC messaging slower to adapt and less responsive to rapidly changing realities. And then our final presentation is a tool which is AI-enabled equity mainstreaming tool, and this will be presented by our colleague Atishe Mathur, who is a research and evaluation specialist in our UNICEF India country office. He has partnered with a private sector organization to develop a tailored product that informs UNICEF evaluations and research. The tool responds to challenges in consistently identifying and addressing inequities in evaluations, where bias and gaps in applying standards can leave the most marginalized populations invisible. The tool is currently in the pilot at scale stage, being used by 20 plus country office colleagues. So these are the three presentations that we have today. After the presentations, we'll open the session up for questions and discussions. And we are, of course, very interested in hearing your experiences in using AI tools in evaluations, what has worked, the challenges you faced, and the lessons learned in applying these tools. Also, during the presentations, if you have any specific questions and comments, please feel free to type them in the chat. We'll be monitoring closely and will ensure that they all get addressed at the end of the session. With that, I am very delighted to hand over to our presenters who will walk us through these innovations in more details, share their lessons from early experimentation, and also help us to reflect what this means for the future of evaluations. Thank you, and I look forward to a rich and engaging session. Over to you, Ali and Daniel.
Thank you, Jane, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Ali, and I'll co-present this first case in the session together with Danielle. And to start and lay out the problem that this use of AI in evaluation was addressing, it's important to recall that development programs like UNICEF's, they operate in a complex social, economic, and increasingly emergency settings where the numbers alone don't tell the story, and the stories alone rarely are sufficient. So this is why mixed methods have become the dominant approach in development evaluation. The challenge with quantitative approach, as Ray Bamberger refers to in it, is the Cartesian trap, the tendency to focus only on the one question that can be answered through quantitative survey data and missing that social, cultural, political context that shapes people's lives. Qualitative methods, on the other hand, help overcome this by capturing the lived experiences, but they also introduce their own limitations because the evaluator becomes the primary instrument for the data collection and interpretation, so the findings can be influenced in the interviewing style or the selective perception or unconscious bias of the evaluator. Another challenge is integration, and in their thesis, The Foundations of Mixed Method Research, Tedley and Tashakuri observed that mixed methods often combine the strengths of both approaches, but they also combine the weaknesses. So the burden gets shifted from data collection to the analytical phase, where evaluators have to reconcile the different forms of this imperfect evidence. And finally, there's the operational reality. The collecting of high quality data across different geographies and populations in very fragile and emergency settings requires a lot of coordination and training and supervision and translation and costs, which raises the question, can we address some of these challenges at the point of data collection itself? Can we create an approach that delivers that contextual depth that a skilled human interviewer can do and still achieve that consistency, scale, and speed of an automated survey? And this is the gap that the case study explores. So to explore how well the gap could be addressed, we developed this, developed and deployed an AI-powered conversational agent designed to conduct text-based, semi-structured interviews. And the system, as Jane mentioned, has been used in multiple countries and development contexts and engaged a wide set of respondents. And what makes this approach different is that it's a hybrid nature. It's like a skilled interviewer. It can adapt to the flow of the conversation, ask follow-up questions, and probe for clarification. At the same time, because every interview is being done by the same agent, it's procedurally consistent and reliable in a way that's difficult to achieve with deployment of a huge number of human enumerators. And for the evaluation manager, the benefit goes beyond data collection. The platform can generate real-time thematic analysis and emerging insights as the interviews are being completed. And this allows the interview guide to be refined during data collection to ensure that the evidence is relevant and targeted and adaptive and strategically focused on the most important questions. So rather than just describing it, I want to quickly show you the tool that we use and also the dashboard that is the brains behind it. So this is actually the actual tool that we used in the Telepath program review that Daniel is going to speak about. It's essentially just like any chat GPT that you use, Cloud or Gemini, and it's inverted in a way where instead of you asking the questions, it's been prompted to ask you the questions that have been provided to it through a semi-structured interview guide. So what you see there on the screen is the initial information about the evaluation and the consent form. So if I just tell it, yes, I consent to proceed, it will look through its next question and propose to you the next question. And through that process, complete the interview with you. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on and also show you the dashboard. And this is the brains behind it, where you, as the evaluation manager, actually define what you want to interview for. So the evaluation name and the evaluation purpose, the number of questions that you want to ask, and the number of probes. And down here is the actual interview guide. So your semi-structured interview guide is entered there, and the agent interprets this in real time and adapts itself to the flow of the conversation to try to get the information that it needs from you. And then another feature of it is the thematic insights. So as the interviews are completed, the analyst, another agent, analyzes transcripts and produces thematic labels that are emerging from those interviews and how frequently they're emerging. So it does this both inductively and deductively. So you can see, for example, program expansion recommendations were quite frequent, and at the bottom were some of the less frequent themes that have emerged so far. So with that brief intro, let me just hand it back to Danielle to tell you more about the field experimentation with this AI interviewer. Over to you, Dan.
Super, thank you, Ali. So I had the simplest of role in this process. Ali has developed absolutely everything, and my role was to just apply it in an evaluation. So the intervention that we evaluated is called TechPath, which is a partnership between the Ministry of Education in Maldives, Google, and UNICEF, and it aims at improving the foundational learning through digital learning. Digital tools, element, computer, but also training of the teachers. And it's a pilot to scale model in which 15 schools have participated. So in terms of the evaluation, so we use the typical evaluation tools that you can think of, which I've listed in that slide. And obviously, we have the opportunity also to test the AI solution. So during this rollout of this new tool, we tested on 4 schools. But it's important to mention that we have completed all the other typical data collection tools before starting this AI solution. And as such, it was mostly about the triangulation validation or already emerging findings, but also it gave us the opportunity to not only look at the data collected, but also kind of testing the tool. And because of that, we had the opportunity to add a couple of specific questions in the questionnaire to kind of probe and test the experience of the different participants to this new tool. Another important remark on how we applied is that at the beginning because it was a new tool for me as well, I was not very comfortable in using it directly with children, which is often what we do in UNICEF evaluation. So we only targeted adults, obviously to minimize any potential risk. And the final point, because of the novelty again, our partner, the Ministry of Education, so we decided to have an help desk to support any participant that use this tool in case they are facing any type of issue. So if you can go to the next slide, Ali. So what worked well? So first, an important feature, and some of them have been already mentioned by Ali, is that this AI solution actually benefited for all the key aspects of a survey. So it's really easy to configure, or at least on my end, because it took me about 30 minutes. Obviously, on the end of Ali to configure, probably took a bit more time. And as a survey, it allows you a broader cover at a very minimal cost, and you can collect a large amount of data in a very short time frame, because obviously people can respond at the same time simultaneously. Another feature which actually I didn't use, but I know that is part of the feature of this tool, is the multilingual capacity, which might be relevant in future in case I use again this tool. From the side of the respondent, and based on the analysis of the timestamp of their responses, we definitely also, as a survey, it allowed them to respond at their own pace, at their own timing, which also is another value. But more importantly, this tool goes much beyond a survey, a simple survey. I think it makes it very conversational. It's like chatting with someone on WhatsApp. And because of the AI is capable of using previous information from answers, really tweak the conversation. And from the feedback that we had from all the people that responded to the survey, they all felt that it was very natural, that that it was not an AI, that could have been a person. Importantly, also about the consistency mentioned in the introduction by Ali, and that also noticed based on the review of the data collected by this tool, is the consistency of the application of the tool and the survey compared to an interview or another type of data collection. I compare the notes that I have compared to the note of my colleague who also do some data collection, and the way we roll out the questionnaire is completely different, while this is always the same. And actually, when you do analysis, obviously it's more helpful, but also you remove most of the bias. Now, the most impressive by far aspect or feature of this tool is the probing capacity of the tool. So whenever there is a need for clarification, or the answer is kind of shallow and requires a specific example, the AI tool is capable of actually like drilling more, like trying to go more in depth and having more information. And because of that, definitely all the responses are much more nuanced than any type of survey. And I would even dare to say that is very equivalent to a key informant interview. So if you compare the result of some of those interaction with my note of interview I conducted, they are very, very similar. Maybe the final point on the positive side of the features is that the way Ali has configured it is that at the end of the interview or the survey, the AI itself is doing kind of a very short summary of the conversation, kind of a validation step, kind of what are the key points that were exchanged during this conversation, which I think was very helpful from the side of the respondent. So moving to the limitation, and I have to be fair here, I think some of the points that I've listed here are mostly due to my limitation and the fact that it was a new tool for me in the way I configured the dashboard that Ali presented. So it may not be directly linked to the tool itself. So the first one, which is actually applying to any digital tool, is about the inclusivity challenge, which I will be talking a bit later about what could be done. But for example, the literacy, the access, connectivity, digital literacy, which may affect the level of participation. The second point I wanted to mention is that while he has most of the benefit of the survey, he also has some of the challenge. And we noticed that compared to other data collection method, the level of participation is lower than, for example, key informant interview. So, for example, we had in that case about 30 to 40% participation. We also noticed that the response provided to our question are normally a bit shorter than a normal. So really more to the point, which obviously when you process the data, when you do the coding, is very helpful because there is no discretion in the conversation. But we had a couple of examples where it went to the extreme. So where there was yes or no, which have been forcing the AI to obviously probing and trying to get more example and try to get a bit more information. The issue is that because of the configuration I did on the AI, I made the threshold on the number of questions. So the consequence is that it creates a situation where, because of so many follow-up questions on the way to responded answer to some of the questions, there was one or two questions that were not asked, which I felt were critical, which maybe in the future there might be a flagging system on the critical question on the survey. The next point I wanted to mention is regarding something that I already said, that by far the most powerful feature is the probing capacity. However, a very punctual situation that we identify where I felt that the AI could have been gone a bit further or could have done better and maybe require a bit more analysis from Ali and myself to see what happened there, because obviously there is a training process of the AI for that future that these type of things don't happen again. One is that the AI did probe a question on a topic that was already covered. The second one was in a moment that it didn't probe on the response that introduced a new concept. That's the issue of the contextual awareness of the tool, and I will come up in my next slide on it. And finally, the third point that we identify kind of a limitation on the probing level was that the AI himself asked or suggested to the participant to reach out to the evaluation team to provide additional information, which was kind of a bit odd because we didn't program the AI to do so. And even though within the frame of the conversation, I think it was completely appropriate, the only issue that because I didn't thought about it, I didn't provide my email or contacts to the AI. So I think in terms of the logic of the conversation, it was appropriate, but obviously put myself in an odd situation. Two more limitation, because contrary of a key informant interview, is that because it is not recorded yet, you're missing all that is related to nonverbal cue, which sometimes may have a value when you conduct interviews or when you do go to the field. And the second one is that I felt that there was some level of limitation in terms of the capacity of the tool to challenge inconsistency of statements. So sometimes it does it, but not on the systematic way and depending on the level of inconsistency. So for example, having a respondent in one question saying something, in another saying something that could contradict a previous statement, I think sometimes there is limitation. And my final point on some of the limitation that I identify at this point, but again, this is a product in development, is regarding the analytical output. So now the tool is providing thematic pattern, which is actually quite helpful. But with all the tools that are currently in the market, I think there is a possibility, I hope so, to link it to other tools so that the outputs are much more powerful and useful for the practitioners, such as myself, when I conduct an evaluation. So obviously, the best way to understand fully what I presented is obviously to try the tool. So Ali did present very briefly how it works. What I will be doing is at the end of all the presentations, so people are not distracted during the other presentations, that I will put the link so you can test it. You can see by yourself and see what I was mentioning. So Ali, if we go to the next slide. So in that slide, I just try to capture some suggestion, recommendation, next step, mostly to as ideas for Ali when he continued his journey with this tool, where I could see this tool evolving. So First, obviously, continuing testing, which is something that is happening, and documenting all the lessons learned. And this is not only testing in similar type of intervention, but in different contexts with different type of evaluation, really to try to improve or identify the key areas of improvement for the tool. For example, I was skeptical at the beginning, but now I'm definitely convinced by this tool. And now I'm trying to convince Ali to apply it again in another evaluation that I'm currently leading in Sri Lanka. And I think this identification of area improvement is to refine the system in general. And there is a couple of things that could be done. I'm mentioning a couple here about the contextual awareness that I mentioned earlier. It's about allowing the AI to have the necessary background by sharing, for example, created documents so that the AI can push the conversation even further. And the other one is about the point that I made about the early detection of contradiction and whatever there is an unusual pattern in the response provided by the interviewee or the person taking the survey. The next area is about inclusion and user experience. So obviously, one point that I was a bit concerned is about mitigating literacy and digital literacy. And I think this is an area which already explored by Ali, is about creating a digital avatar. So moving from only text to audio and video, but also trying to integrate recording and automated transcription. So instead of typing, you will be recording transcripts, which may help us in increasing the level of participation, but also reach people that may not be using this tool as easily as we anticipated. The next point I thought should be, especially for UNICEF, because of the people we are serving, a good evolution will be to develop a child-friendly AI interface. So using tools that could be easier for them to use, for example, drawing, storytelling, gaming, more adapted to the type of subject that we work. The last point in this section is about, we had a couple of feedback that because of all the probing and the threshold I put, that still felt that the survey was a bit long. And I think there might be a way of training the AI in segmenting the survey. So making sure that depending of the typology of person that I interacted, maybe to be more selective and reshape some of the ranking of the questions in the pre-updated or pre-uploaded questionnaire. Analysis part. So obviously the AI or the way the tool works is that it shows you raw data in the format of an Excel, and then you have obviously all the emerging pattern, which is showing the dashboard that was presented by Ali earlier. And this obviously is extremely helpful, but I'm thinking of way that could push and make it easier the analysis for the future. One is obviously the smarter filtering, so making that will allow us to make more granular analysis and much quicker. So for example, you could filter by teams, you can filter by geography, demographic, and others, which will make the analysis part much, much easier. And the other one is regarding auto-coding. So whenever you have raw data, one very tedious part of the work is to code all the evidence and then to do analysis. Well, nowadays, with all the tools that there is in the market, I'm pretty sure that there's a way to link it so that it makes the qualitative data analysis much faster, as well as the synthesis. And my last point, and I hope I still with time, is about the governance. And I think this point kind of deserve a bit of attention. So this is about AI governance and ethics. And I think at the moment, when we conducted these tools with our evaluation, we did develop a specific AI ethic information sheet, as well as a dedicated consent form. But I think if we need to expand the tool to children, and especially because there is also a new evaluation ethic policy within UNICEF, I think we need to be careful. So that's what I wanted to say, just to say that it was, for me at least, a great experience, and I really see the value in this tool. And I congratulate Ali for developing this, and grateful for having the opportunity to test it. Over to you, Jane.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Ali and Daniel, for this presentation. Let's move to the next one so that at least we have a bit of time at the end for questions and discussions. Juan, over to you.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. First, thank you so much for the invitation. Really happy to be here and share more of the work that we're doing in social listening. So just as a way of starting the conversation in the next slide, I'm going to explain a little bit more of what we're trying to respond to. And basically was that traditional SBC messaging, sometimes it's of course effective and it responds to the specific needs of communities, but at the same time, sometimes we have challenges in terms of keeping up with changing realities, right? So usually SBC messaging can be too static. For example, once deployed and they deploy like disseminated broadly, our capacity to adjust it can be a little bit late, so we're perhaps slow to be able to respond to changes. Also, there's limited ability to adapt while programs are running because we sometimes may not have ways of collecting real-time insights and also be able to respond quickly to changes in community dynamics, in narratives, and so on. Also, there's limited access to real-time community insights. Surveys and research they're a good way for us to be able to understand the specific behavioral drivers behind people's behaviors, but sometimes they're periodic. They cannot be as fast as community dynamics change. And also, we may be missing, for example, unprompted concerns, rumors, things that we might not be looking at that are relevant as well for our work. And then also there are scale and complexity challenges. For example, when we're engaging with a significant amount of people, populations, we may have issues, for example, understanding or making sense of large volumes of data, but also because usually we're working with multilingual and also diverse inputs that are usually underutilized. So this is what we're focusing on right now in the next slide, is on trying to work in an integrated manner by combining listening, community engagement, powered by AI for more adaptive SVC. So what we're doing is, I don't know if we can move to the next slide, is combining SEL and social community listening and digital community engagement. The difference is not quite clear cut because at some point, for example, community engagement does involve, for example, interviewing communities and listening what they're thinking, what they are their attitudes against regarding a specific issue. But also social community listening combines also different ways of us of engaging with communities as well. So we're basically using at the moment social community listening, mostly online, but also through offline components to capture some of the unprompted community signals, right? So not only, but sometimes we go and we collect information directly from populations, but it's also important to say what they say outside of this landscape of being prompted by a specific survey, and sometimes also by an actor who's part of the response as well, which may have an impact in terms of how people engage with a specific polls and surveys. At the same time, we're also engaging with digital tools to support ongoing dialogue and also co-design. And then we're using AI in these two components to be able to enable faster analysis, synthesis, and also helping us to detect patterns at scale. And also we're working with generating, using AI to be able to generate some insights and message recommendations based on the data that we use. And this contributes to programming by ensuring that our program design is grounded in real-time community needs and perceptions. Also by combining structured data collection surveys, for example, with unstructured data as well, open feedback, but also some of the things that we're able to collect via public information, via in social community listening. Also a rapid assistant synthesis of large multilingual data sets. Also, it helps us to combine diverse mechanisms to listen to diverse voices as well, and also ensure that we're collecting the perspective of minority groups. And then finally, it also enables us to have a more active course correction while interventions are still going. In the next slide, I just have like a quick graph of what are the different sources of social community listening. So we mainly used publicly available information in social media and internet to see what narratives are happening around specific issues. Also, we look into what are the inputs from media, but also sometimes we have deployed in different country offices ways of engaging with communities in which they share, for example, their concerns, such as call centers, for example, and we combine all of that into a comprehensive database. But also, we may have social data and information that we're collecting via informants in the community, right? So for them to tell us what's happening in the community. all of that, including online and offline data sets, help us to have a broad social and community listening approach, which then we are able to collect, analyze, and integrate into our work, and also validate through triangulation as well by connecting it with other data sources and data collection efforts. And this is ideally also leading to corrective programmatic action. In the next slide, I focus more on the specific role that AI plays. So basically, we are collecting information from multiple data sources, and we use, for example, a specific SEO software called I Hear You to help us also look at a specific information by creating word taxonomies that are adapted based on the specific context. And then we use AI to help us organize and filter information, so we reduce noise. Sometimes we like avoid also having on an ongoing basis fine-tuning the model, and now, for example, we're more capable of being able to exclude irrelevant information, but also have a more fine-tuned sort of like clustering and segmentation of information as well, right? Which is also one of the key things that AI help us to do, which is basically not only collecting information but also making sense of the data. And one of the key aspects that I want to highlight here is that usually this clustering or categorization as well is emic, so it's based on what communities think about the issue. It's not like we are predefining the category. So that also helps us to understand what are the different sort of like mapping that communities do when they're engaging with different issues that could be Ebola, could be mpox, and other types of also like children violence against children and so on. And then we also sort of like use AI to help us validate the information across themes, timelines, and geographic comparisons as well. And then also the AI is in this case is also not only generating, combining the data, but it's also generating recommendations for action. And this is something that we have also been adapting in an ongoing basis, making sure that it's building on some of the previous social and behavioral change that we have done, building on SPC frameworks and experiences as well, to ensure that we have insightful but also evidence informed and theory informed actions as well, to help us with community engagement. One of the three things that it help us do, again, in summary, is faster insights, deeper analysis, but also we're also taking into account ethics and limitations as well, not only in terms of the kind of information that we're collecting, making sure that it is not traceable to the specific individual. We're not collecting personal identifiable information as well, but also in that we have to know that that the sources that we collect are also going to define which voices we're listening and which voices we're not listening, right? So with the idea is always to focus beyond online and to always have additional efforts to be able to reach the last mile, to ensure that we're also integrating their insights, but also ensuring that we're not just translating AI into action. There's also ongoing human oversight to ensure the accuracy of the information, but also to ensure that we're transforming those insights into expert informed also actions as well. In the next slide, I'm going to be focusing more on the work that we have been doing, not only in social community listening, but also in using different community engagement tools to be able to go another step in terms of community participation, which is co-design. So we don't only analyze the information and generate the messages ourselves, we're also trying to ensure that we're connecting with communities to build messages that resonate with them, right? And in this case, what we have been doing is using this platform that is called YouReport, which is broadly disseminated in many countries that we're supporting. And we have used that to invite communities to share their recommendations, in this case, on mpox prevention messages, and explain also why they think they work. And we were able to collect thousands of community messages, not only through YouReport, but also through other data collection tools, including all the other digital collection tools, into a single data set. And we then use AI to help us cluster not only the surfacing themes, so how, like, what are the recommendations, but also what are the language patterns, the emotional tones. And it was interesting because it generated not only help us to test hypotheses, for example, on the role of the messenger, on the role of the framing, on the tone as well. So it gave us overall recommendations based on what people said, why people said some messages worked, but also by interpreting the messages they shared and kind of like understanding specific patterns of the messages that they were suggesting. In addition to that, we were able to build insight-informed refined messages based on crowdsourced messages. So basically a combination of the messages that people were proposing, but also using AI to generate messages based on the recommendations that were collected from this exercise. And then we were able to also to share back these messages because this platform allows for ongoing community engagement, so we can have long-term or long to mid-term conversations with them. And we share back the messages with them and ask them to also to prioritize them based on which they found most compelling, most more clear, and also more relevant. And then finally, we shared this back with country offices to ensure that they have the guidance in terms of what works based on community insights, but also the specific messages that we were able to generate. On an ongoing phase, what we would also recommend is to use also the capacities of ongoing engagement of these tools, to also do follow-up surveys as well, to be able to measure SBC outcomes. Are we able to effectively change behaviors, attitudes around the specific issue that we're trying to address? In the next slide, I'm going to share some of the overall insights in terms of what worked and what didn't. The first one is that this kind of approach, SEL, digital engagement, supported by AI, is help us to have faster insights, also at scale, to also ensure that we're constantly building on community realities, ensuring that we have enhanced capacity to be able to improve their relevance and adaptability of our messages, but also it helps us to sort of like close the gap that we sometimes have between data collection and effective action by responding more rapidly to the insights that we're collecting through some of these tools. Challenges, representation bias to ensure that basically not all populations are going to be equally represented digitally. So this also has to be part of a broader data collection effort and a broader community engagement effort. Also data interpretation risk. Even though we're collecting information sometimes in the context of also by triangulation, there is always a possibility that the AI system that is collecting and analyzing the information may not be able to fully understand context or nuances of a specific cultural aspects, for example. So that's why we also need ongoing human oversight. And then just operational demands. It assumes that we have existing access to populations, for example, in terms of community engagement platforms. So it's always useful to use tools or structures, community structures beyond digital tools that will allow us to quickly engage with communities, right? So building something from the onset, a digital platform, is going to take time. And then also feedback response gap there's basically always a risk of us not being using the same tool to respond back to the users and explaining how we use their inputs. So I think the next slide is the last one. I don't want to take too much time because I know we have limited time.
Yeah.
And then yes, so basically this is a little bit on our recommendations. We're still working on improving the SEL and DCE and integration into routine decision making to ensure that this is part of the overall process. But also we're looking to scale it to standardize workflows across country contexts, but also to embedding SEL and community engagement into program cycles. And then future consideration is strengthening the equity in participation and ensuring that we have an integrated diversification of mechanisms to ensure that everyone is able to participate, or a more diverse group is able to participate, ensuring alignment with data protection and the ethical use of AI, which is an ongoing process, and also building skills across the different teams in UNICEF for interpreting and acting on AI-supported insights. Yeah, these are some of the overall recommendations. Happy to provide more feedback and information via the questions. Back to you, Jane.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Juan. I wish we had more time. Atisha, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. So again, thanks a lot to the others for, again, innovations that you've spoken about, which are more kind of outward facing towards respondents, community members even. I'm coming in with something slightly different, which is more inward looking, which is an innovation we're working on, which really kind of comes in before we reach out to stakeholders and respondents and so on, something really to strengthen the very nature of evaluations that we're conducting in UNICEF. Next slide, please, Ali. So let me start with a bit of a context. So again, the most marginalized populations are front and center when it comes to UNICEF. It's there in our tagline for every child. And we think that it's essential, of course, to focus on the most marginalized population groups to move that kind of needle on the SDGs. We also think that there's an opportunity cost that if you were to not work on the most marginalized issues, and inequities, that there's a risk of perpetuating some of these. And then finally, when evidence work and evaluation work does not take into account some of those perspectives, we further kind of leave behind certain population groups and so on. So evaluations within UNICEF have focused quite a bit on mainstreaming gender and equity. But again, we always feel that more can be done. And in that same spirit is where I'm going to be making this presentation. Next slide, please. So within UNICEF India, we've been doing some amount of work to really understand who are the most marginalized and who are the most vulnerable groups within the country, within the context. And I know colleagues on the call, Mike is here, who's worked on kind of putting together a sort of definition, root cause analysis to really identify who are we speaking about when we're talking about equity? That equity, just as a term, doesn't exist in the ether, but is really speaking about certain very specific population groups. Now, there's not an exhaustive list, there's an indicative list of those who get left behind, those who we find harder to speak to, reach out to, and measure. So when you look at a list like this, it makes it very real that one, there are hidden inequities that exist, and it's important for us as evaluators to bring those front and center. There's also intersectionality, that often it's the same child that's kind of undergoing multiple deprivations at the same time as well. Second is internally as well, this is where kind of reflexivity in research comes in, is that there are certain biases that come in the way that I may understand some of these inequities, but also work towards addressing these. And then the third is that while there are norms and standards that UNICEF does have on how do you address some of these, there may be, again, inconsistency in the way that these are applied in evaluations. And this may be a little bit of a capacity issue, or maybe linked to, again, certain inherent biases that we may hold and so on. Next slide, please, Ali. So to that end, we had three very specific kind of aha moments, and I'm going to talk about those in the lead up to, again, this solution being tested out. The first was a core insight, which was that we needed to enable researchers and evaluators, again, within the country context, those we work with, to more meaningfully incorporate equity within the evaluations that we're running. First, by, again, checking the biases that we come in. And second, by ensuring that there's some sort of uniformity in the way that we adhere to the best-in-class norms and standards. And these best-in-class norms and standards could be sitting within UNICEF, but very often they're sitting outside of UNICEF, because the context within academia is very often moving faster, putting forth certain frameworks and so on, that we within UNICEF can really kind of adapt and use in our evaluations. So that was really crafting what was the problem statement that we were dealing with. Next slide, please. This was what we did with that problem. So first was, again, an inherent belief that given that the AI landscape generally is moving so quickly, we thought it would be faster to repurpose solutions that are already out there rather than rebuilding a completely fresh kind of solution here. So that's where, again, there's been a bit of a difference in us working with a private partner here. So, and that's the entities called Belong AI, to tailor a tool that they were already working on, which was a sort of equity advisory tool, to tailor it to very specifically UNICEF evaluation needs, again, on gender and equity. And one of the strongest pieces of the solution that I'm just going to share is the fact that, unlike most AI tools that are available on the market, some of them even free of cost, In this AI tool, the objective was that how do you really curate and manage what the AI tool that's informing your evaluations is fed. So there's a huge barrier when it comes to the information that exists on equities and inequities and how do you inform evaluations versus what's actually fed into the tool. So again, I'm going to come to this a little later, but the strongest asset here within the tool that we were working on was the curated repository that we worked with. And then the third piece was really around the tool itself. So what did we end up with? So we ended up with an interactive AI tool that focuses on very specific areas. One is gender, and gender has a spectrum. So we're looking at LGBTQ+, disability, child sexual exploitation and abuse as an area, caste, which is a very context-dependent identifier here in India, tribal population groups, and religion. So we're talking about religious minorities here as well. So these were some of the kind of sticky inequities that we were working with, or identities that we were working with. And what we ended up developing was a quality assurance tool, an AI-backed quality assurance tool that looked at UNICEF's research studies and evaluations and analyzed them against what were some of the best-in-class norms and standards in the areas of gender, disability, CSEA, caste, tribes, and religion. And an example here has been working with, for example, the University of Edinburgh, the Child Light kind of unit within there, to look at what are some of the best-in-class frameworks on CSEA, right? A very sensitive topic which sees a lot of these invisible children being affected. In effect, what the tool does is that it comes in quite like an evaluation specialist at the terms of reference stage, the inception report stage, and the final report stage, to come in and quality check how meaningfully have you incorporated, again, the voices, opinions, needs, and rights of the most marginalized population groups. Next slide, please. Now, this is just a quick demonstration. I know it's not a very dynamic one. It's these screenshots that I'm pasting over here, is how this works. We wanted to keep the tool very intuitive and uncomplicated. So the tool is a simple drag and drop system. It's a website. You have login details. You upload a key evaluation product. Like I said, a terms of reference, an inception report, or a final report. Bear in mind, the inception report carries your tools in it as well. So the tool is capable, the one we've developed, to really analyze each of your kind of methodological tools associated as well. You upload it onto the AI tool. You select either specifically what inequity you want to focus on or what identity you wish to focus on, or you have an option of focusing on all, which is a very comprehensive review that it gives you. You wait for 20 minutes, and in 20 minutes, it produces a PDF kind of summary of recommendations that it's making. And that's a snapshot that is on the right, which goes, again, literally page by page and tells you how to improve the product or the document that you have uploaded onto the system. Next slide, please. Now, the nature of feedback that we typically get has been quite interesting to look at. On the one hand, it looks at the background and context setting in a typical terms of reference or a desk review and identifies data sources which we typically did not look at. And these could be, again, as a result of just not being aware or certain biases creeping in and so on. The second is that the objectives translating all the way to the questions phase, it's really helped us frame some of our objectives and questions very, very specifically to address some of these inequities that it has identified. And then relatedly, it also helps figure out methodological appropriateness. So how apt or appropriate is the methodology that we are, again, employing over here. What we're not seeing as yet is it commenting on the design itself. Right, so it's not really coming in at the moment to comment on how do you make the design more kind of strong. That isn't happening, but at the methodology phase, it's absolutely coming in pretty strong. And then towards the more mature products that we have, which is your final reports, it's also making recommendations on analysis. So how do you bring in intersectional analysis within the kind of data that you've collected? What is possible versus what sort of limitations should you be calling out? And it goes even further to help you craft certain recommendations, which are informed of some of these kind of inequities that we're talking about. A very curious feature of this, and we keep talking to our kind of colleagues here who've now started working with this tool, is that the AI tool is absolutely capable of rewriting the report for you. It's a conscious decision we've taken for it not to do that. A big, again, feature of this tool was to really build staff capacities, including my own, and check biases that come in as well, rather than kind of offloading or outsourcing the rewriting or the writing of certain key deliverables that we have. Next, please. Very quickly on some of the reflections and lessons learned. In terms of data protections, again, UNICEF is very strict about the kind of information which is internal to UNICEF that goes onto external portals. How is it stored? How secure is it? Is it encrypted, etc.? Here we did, again, align with all UNICEF data protection policies. This was because it went through, again, UNICEF procedures internally and aligns with laws in India around where do you store that sort of data. Biases that come in typically with AI tools, we didn't see that much of that happening simply because we, again, controlled and curated the repository that it was being fed. So we're very aware of what were some of the more kind of popular biases coming in and how do you really patch that up with the right kind of frameworks and feeding the AI tool with these frameworks. In terms of, again, the kind of false confidence or kind of positives that it may come up with, not only does it rely on the repository that it's been fed, but there's also a human element, which adds to operational costs, of course. But there is a researcher who actually does update the repository very regularly. So let's say tomorrow there's something new in the disability space, then the AI tool is very capable of being fed some of these new frameworks as well. The human in the loop that I spoke of has again been a very interesting feature over here. Is we're looking at the human in the loop not so much as an inefficiency, but really as a capacity building feature as well. What will really help with some of the sustainable results will be for UNICEF staff to really understand how do you meaningfully integrate equity and gender dimensions within your evaluation work. Lessons learned, one is on AI output and user experience. We didn't guess this at first, but given that colleagues are so used to in their personal lives using the likes of ChatGPT, Claude, and Copilot, that they're very used to an AI system looking a certain way, behaving a certain way. As a result of that, they expected this AI tool to also kind of look, feel, and behave in a certain way. One of the features has been 20 minutes sometimes feels very long for colleagues who are used to a ChatGPT giving them 5-second advice on life decisions, etc. So that's been an interesting feature over here to address. And then some of the core kind of assumptions that we were testing here was that typically AI tools were being looked at for efficiency gains within evaluations. Here we're attempting to make effectiveness gains. So how do you really improve the quality and nature of evaluations that UNICEF is conducting as well? The last slide that I have is really just on next steps. This is a pilot at scale that we're running, and I have put in a screenshot here. Ali, if you could go to the next one, of how we're going to be assessing. Again, I am at the heart of it an evaluator, so I am evaluating the AI tool itself. This is the metric that we're developing, is to judge if this tool is really kind of fit to be adopted or not. So that's one, stay tuned for the findings. Second is we're looking at, again, expanding this to say, sure, this informs evaluations, but how does it maybe potentially informs programming decisions at the planning stage as well? So really expanding the scope beyond evaluations is one potential opportunity here. The third is collaborating with other agencies and institutions as well to really see how can this tool be modified, adapted, and so on. And then finally, again, we're very open. This is not the only tool that's going to change the way in which we evaluate. We're very open to really seeing how is it that those invisible populations that I spoke to earlier can still be mainstreamed in our evaluations. So we're always open to ideas. I'll stop here and wrap it up. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. For these very rich presentations. And obviously, 1 hour is never enough for this kind of engagement, but we really, really appreciate you taking the time to listen to these sessions. Yes, I know we have run out of time, but if we just have a few more minutes, I would want to, there are a few questions which have come up and which have already been addressed. But I think one that has come up and a number of people are asking, even said conversations, is how these tools could be available to colleagues who are outside the organization. So if you could reflect on that, because I know they are still pilots, so you are still testing them. So how would this work, for example, if someone else is interested to use one of these tools? Ali, do you want to come in? And
Sure,
then
Jane,
Juan.
thanks.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I briefly mentioned this in the chat as well, but I'm
Okay.
thinking about this as a project for improvement to become a public good. So if you have a particular project in mind where you want to use AI interviewer, please reach out. And if there's mutual interest in how it can improve the tool, but at the same time can help you, we can set it up just like we did with Danielle with the Maldives case, where you have an instance of it to deploy and use.
All right. Thank you very much. And Juan?
Sorry, I was responding to one question in the chat.
Okay.
Could you repeat the
Yeah.
question, please?
It is if this tool, your tool, the one that you have just presented, could also be available to organizations external of UNICEF.
Yeah, at the moment, this is something that we can discuss. We haven't worked with other organizations, but in principle, it is possible. We'll just have to define the specific conditions in which that could work. But beyond this, one of the key things that we want to do is also contribute to the open source community by ensuring that the code source and like the source code and the overall like information that this platform is also available for people to be able to leverage it in development context as well. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking on more of the long term, which is sort of like ensuring that there is an offer to organizations for them to be able to manage their own SEL systems as well.
All right, thank you very much. Atishe?
Again, we would really like for a tool like this to be adopted outside of UNICEF as well. I think it strengthens the overall ecosystem. I think to begin with, one of the topics that we've been talking about is how do we get the evaluation agencies and individuals who we work with to adopt this tool as well. So we'd be very open to really exploring how we can share this outside. Bear in mind that there's a private player involved here as well. This is not a UNICEF only product. So we're still working on really as to what does scaling it outside look like. But I know that both UNICEF and the private partner we're working with are both open to the possibility. So please get in touch and we can take it case by case.
All right, thank you very much. And yeah, thank you colleagues for joining, and we'll be concluding now. But just to say that, Daniel, are we sharing the contacts on the message here? So that colleagues can reach out if they have.
Well, it's up to each colleague to share his own. I don't want to take the responsibility to share it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Or or I can share mine, and if there are any specific comments, then I can take those and share them with the team, if that's okay. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, colleagues, and for joining the session. We can share more additional information in due time. Just do reach out to us. I'm just putting my email address here, so you can reach out to me, and we'll ensure that we share additional information as necessary. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.